Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
Hello everybody, welcome along. It's the post-second test match Cricket Badger podcast for the Ashes. And I'll tell you one thing, it's going to take some comeback by England to get my 2-2 in this series to be anywhere near accurate, because England have been absolutely whipped in both first and second test match. To join me to talk about all things the second test and beyond, I welcome back Mark, Phil and Ollie. And gentlemen, good to have you back with me. We're all English supporters, effectively. It's not been great, has it, Mark? It has not been great.
No.
Actually, just before you answer that, I need to explain something. Mark is dressed like he's off to a Ku Klux Klan meeting, but he's actually in Egypt on holiday, aren't you? So it's good to have you with us from abroad.
Yeah, I've been in Egypt. I've been watching it on the iPad and I've just come back from something to eat, so I'm just relaxing. But on England's performance, it was yet another repetition, really, of the previous Test match. And I think last week you asked me the question if England could win this Test match. I said, they've got the individuals, but they won't win, and they underperformed again. And it's really looking as though when people say, "Have you got any answers?" I don't think anybody has anymore, because we just don't know where to start with England at the moment. It's a car crash, and to get beat by 270 odd runs and make 400 for 40 wickets, and then Joe Root blaming the bowlers and so forth. I just think, it's a car crash, and it could be 5-0 at this rate. It really could.
It was interesting, Joe Root's post-match, Ollie. I don't know if you saw his interview, but knowing Root, he's usually quite a placid fella. He's got a little bit of steel inside of him that kind of he keeps well hidden. But he was angry after that second test match performance. I took his interview as basically he was calling out the bowlers. Very rarely does he actually call out a member of his team. He likes to keep that harmony. He likes to keep any discussions behind the scenes kind of thing. But I got the impression that he'd been asking Jimmy and Stuart and the like to bowl a fuller length, and effectively they'd pretty much said no, and they continued to bowl shorter.
So it's really strange that he called him out for that, considering as captain, and he said and right, they did bowl shorter length, too shorter length, and didn't pitch up enough. But he was helped set the field for them, and he didn't make the changes. He's in control of this, and he's facilitating this bowling style.
What he was saying was, I heard his interview on the radio afterwards. He was saying they've had discussions. He's been asking them to bowl fuller, and apart from actually going up there and bowl it for them, they weren't doing it.
It doesn't. Something. I mean, you've hit in talking about this. Something isn't right. It doesn't seem like a happy squad, and I know that a winning team is normally a happier team. But I look at both sets of players. And I look at the way the body language is from all sides. It doesn't seem like we have a plan, even though we say we plan for every eventuality. It doesn't seem people are very happy. Root doesn't seem as happy as he normally is, and I like Joe Root. I think he's a great guy, and I don't think he's a particularly brilliant captain, but he's the best option we have at the moment. He's the only name on the team sheet, so we have to go with it.
I mean, to be honest, Ollie, he's the only option we've got, isn't
he? Well, Mark's put his name forward. I don't know if he's the captain material yet, but he's got to prove himself on the tour.
He's already just white.
Yeah,
I've just been out training. That's why I'm dressed in this.
Yeah, ice bath and cool down, and then you've done that. If you look at the difference between all the sides and the harmonious aspects of it, I watched Usman when he was Usman Khawaja was fielding. He's dancing and having a nice time with the fans. They're only 1-0 up. It's not as if they're 3-0 up and the Ashes has already won. It looks like a squad that's more content than ours. It looks fractious within the team. There's so many poor decisions, and they don't know if they're coming or going and muddled. That either comes from Silverwood or Root, and Root must be frustrated. In the form of his life, he's probably not many players ever get to this level of form or of run scoring or accumulate as many as he does. And he's breaking all records for England, but decides getting hammered day in, day out. How he calls out the bowling, well, that's a different issue, because that comes to a point with practice that, as Mark said earlier, we barely score 400 with 20 wickets in a game. You're not going to win many with that. And also, it doesn't seem to be any change within the batting order. It seems, we didn't get enough runs, we'll change a bowler. That will sort everything out. Or we'll drop Chris Wokes and we'll bring in Mark Wood. That will help us get 400, 500 runs in an innings. It
is weird, Ollie, isn't it? Every time you hear anybody talking about the team, it's the bowling they talk about first, where the bowling is not the issue. I mean, the bowling is an issue. There are problems with the bowling, but it's the runs, isn't it? If you score 227 and then 147 in the first innings, you are behind the 8 ball. You are not, as a captain, you are not leading that test match, and you're not able to set the fields. You're not able to attack. You're not able to do anything from there. Phil, I mean, Ollie just mentioned Chris Silverwood, Joe Root, in terms of, obviously they're the head honchos in that squad. I firmly believe, though, that to a degree they have to take some responsibility, of course, because they're in charge over there. But I think Chris Silverwood has been in the red ball environment, or pink ball as it was over the last week, has been handed a gun with no bullets in it, because he's basically taking this is an English county structural problem, not necessarily an Ashes series. As Ollie just said, I mean, I listened to Jonathan Agnew's 6-parter on the BBC, where he talked to pretty much every single one of the 22 backroom staff that were going across to Australia, from the nutritionist to the sports scientist, the strength and conditioning coaches, the batting, bowling, fielding, whatever coaches. It's not like ECB have not planned for this Ashes trip. It's just that there's a bit of muddled thinking actually over there in team selection to me, but the county scene isn't providing red ball players.
It's not, but we're told that this series is 4 years in the planning, or whatever it was. What planning had Ollie Robinson bowling off spin? What? We'll
come back to that, because I think that wasn't good, was it?
I didn't see it, but when I read it, I assumed that I had either been spiked with something, or was desperately ill, because I couldn't believe that I was actually reading that had happened. The planning in terms of preparation, the lack of a practice game before we get out there, the sending the Lions home when you've got your only options are really sitting in that team. There has been some planning. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Chris Silverwood, but I do feel that there's been some decisions that are very, very hard to explain.
I mean, let's talk about the Lions, Phil, because you take over. I listened to the operations guy at the ECB on that Jonathan Agnew thing. It was actually talked about. We're thinking coordinating the Lions with the full team and all this kind of stuff. Fair enough, the Lions probably aren't able to play too many games over there at the moment. There might be reasons why they thought it's better to send them home, but surely you keep maybe 5 or 6 of them back with the squad. You've got some that have gone to the Big Bash that are over there anyway, but it doesn't make sense, does it? Surely you've got a 5-test match series in COVID times. You've had a shadow squad over there, and you've sent them home.
It takes one person to catch it. And luckily and hopefully the isolation procedures work and you limit it, but it could be 2, 3, 4 players that suddenly drop out. It would be very handy to have some Lions left out there, not least because the options for coming in for some fairly desperate batting situations are pretty thin on the ground. So the idea of bringing in one of the Lions who hopefully got a bit of time in the middle, if nothing else, because I mean the Lions weren't playing stupendously, as I understand. I didn't see them, but from what I've read, it wasn't fantastic. But it smacked. I think there was a plan, but I think that plan went out of the window as soon as the practice game went, and from then on, it has been lurching from one seemingly chaotic decision to another. The idea of not playing one or other of Broad and Anderson in the first test doesn't seem to make much sense. The idea of playing a spinner on that first pitch and not the second. I mean, perhaps with the benefit of hindsight, it seems unbelievable. But my understanding is that Adelaide is renowned for taking a bit of spin. So
they'd have been almost better, Phil. The first Test team would have been better in the second Test, and vice versa, almost, wouldn't it?
So what planning is going in? I mean, I can understand why Root has gone in and lambasted the Well, it's not lambasted them. Perhaps they need it. Has gone in and given the bowlers a bit, because firstly, I think that they will respond to that. I don't think the batsmen. Well, there's almost no point bollocking the batsman, because I don't think it's attitudinal. I think it is technical. And you can see, I mean, we watched Burns in the second innings, and it was heart in your mouth the whole time. But you couldn't criticise the guy for his determination. He was fighting very hard. Buttler again.
It was mind over matter, that, wasn't it?
It was, and that, to be honest, if that's what you've got, then I will take that every day of the week. I will take a defeat where you've tried your absolute utmost, and you've come unstuck, but you've fought as hard as you possibly can. I don't think there's an England fan that could argue with that. And I think there are a few of the batsmen, despite their offerings. Josh Buttler, another one in the second innings. It's a creditable knock, even if it doesn't, for me, paper over the cracks. But he's clearly buckled down and fought tremendously hard in that second innings. And in that position, I think that's as much as you can ask for. The reason I think it's worth bollocking the bowlers is because they're not doing. They're more concerned about being driven than taking wickets.
They've bowled in Adelaide during this Test match exactly the same way they bowled in Adelaide 4 years ago. They've not learned anything from that.
But they've been told. It's not like they weren't aware. It's not like they weren't aware. It seems to be an attitude.
I was going to ask Mark. I get the impression that there's so many voices in that setup, and there are so many plans in that setup that they're almost stuck to Plan A, regardless of what happens. It seems to me, rather than it being a muddle like Phil's just described, I think they're so blinkered on what they've planned to do, and it's almost like people justifying their roles in that their voices need to be heard. They need to stick on that course. That now it's gone off course. They're desperately trying to get back onto the plan rather than actually adapt to the situations.
I'm not. I mean, we keep going. Everyone keeps talking about plans and this, that, and the other. I'm not sure there is a plan. To be honest with you,
I mean, there is a very detailed plan. It's just the wrong one, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. Does that detailed plan involve not playing Jack Leach for 6 Test matches in England and then playing him in the first Test match on a green top at the Gabba? Is that part of the big plan? Is it? I think, going back to your question about too many voices, I think that's actually quite pertinent, because I think with Rooters, I'm not sure how strong your personality is to have that hold over the likes of Anderson and Broad, who are quite big characters in their own right. And I think one of the issues with Root is, he likes to be liked by everybody, and I don't think his personality comes across enough on the field. And when we saw that in the summer, actually, the same thing happened at Lords in that Test match, that mad hour and a half, where he just seemed to lose it and he couldn't control the bowlers. And as a captain, he just lost it. And I think, I'm not sure how strong he is as an individual on the field or off the field to be able to captain.
I mean, I've never been captained by him, but I know him when he was younger. And he has got some steely grit inside of him. You don't get to be the top end of the England team without having something about you. So he's not just going to roll over and have his tummy.
I'm not saying he's got nothing about him, but I'm saying he's got some big personalities to manage, and I'm not sure he knows how to do it.
It's not easy.
And I think the other issue in terms of Root and Silverwood is, we can say they've been handed a difficult hand and all the rest of it, but they wanted complete control over the actual team. You've got somebody, Silverwood, who's been given what he wanted. They've got rid of all the checks and balances. So a bit like football managers now, they have to be accountable. And that's the model they wanted. There's no point in them saying, well, it's not our fault, I've been given a bad hand and this, that, and the other. They wanted that structure so they could control everything. And actually, since they've got that, England's Test performances have gone downhill dramatically.
I want to talk about some of the players. we talked a lot about Rory Burns after the first Test match. We'll give him a free pass this week. But Ollie Pope is somebody who I've got a lot of time for, Ollie. I think he's a terrific prospect. We spoke last week about how long can you be a prospect and when do you... I mean, he hits his 24th birthday in the next few days. He just seems so muddled and so... It's like his mind's going at 100 miles an hour when he walks to the crease. He's got every shot in the book. He's scored runs for Surrey for fun. He's obviously got a load of talents. He's just got to kind of manage his own game a little bit better. And I tweeted earlier, and I said on a podcast that I was a guest on earlier, if I was him, I would want to be talking to the likes of Graham Thorpe, to Jonathan Trott, to Joe Root even, and say, you've been successful at Test level. What is your mindset when you walk to the crease? How do you cope with that? What are you thinking about? How do you tackle the first 15 minutes, the first 30 minutes, the first 2 hours? And how do you then grow your innings and not play the way I am at the moment? Whether they have those conversations or not, I don't know. But I wonder whether as a young player in that dressing room, it might be something you really want to know, but are you thinking, I'm asking something really obvious here? I'm showing some weaknesses if I ask this question. These are people that have scored thousands of Test runs. They might just laugh at me. It's just what I'd do, Ollie. It's just what I'd do. If I was Ollie Pope, I'd want to try and talk to a Jonathan Trott to say, how do you tackle it? Because I'm getting it wrong at the moment.
If he's working with them and they're coaching him, what are they doing? Because he seems to be going backwards. That's the worst bit. Because it seems to be shrouded with so much things with the England setup at the moment. You don't know who's working with what, and there seems to be a lot of coaches there, but not much improvement on the field. And he is a prime talent that I say this as a talent. He's played what 20, 25 tests now. It must be around that mark.
It's about 20, isn't it, I think.
Is it about 20?
Yeah.
Then that's you're then now becoming a more established player. I know he's still young, but I look at the likes of people like Root and to lesser Mark Stokes. When they come into the team, they're at that sort of mental ability to be able to take it on. Half of the game, more than half of the game, is about mental approach and how do you go about it. And if you look at Mark Ramprakash, he was an absolute fantastic technical player and wonderful to watch, but just couldn't play at the highest level. The difference between him and Pope is Pope, instead of Mark Ramprakash, who was constantly playing for his place because of the crazy setup we had in the 90s. Now he's in there. He's obviously very much appreciated as part of the squad. He's a valued talent that's in there. He isn't progressing. And what we're going to do with him? I think it'd be, if he's not asking people for help, what are the coaches? They should be going to him and talking to him and saying, this is what you're doing wrong, or this is how we can help you, and just asking some vital questions. I watched, I know I talked about last week as well, Ricky Ponting did a lot of this sort of thing with Pretty Patel, Pretty Shaw, Parthill Shaw, with Shaw at Delhi.
If you're watching Pretty Patel, don't let the one in the top right-hand corner back in the country.
Don't let him back in. And I think he talked a lot with Shaw and saying, it's about clarity, your mind being clear. And you've hit the nail on the head. When Pope comes out to bat, it's either a shot of ball or something going on, or he's running across the crease. It's all over the shop. It's brilliant TV. If I wasn't an England fan, I wasn't throwing things at TV, I'd be loving it. But the fact is that he at the moment, he's definitely not making the most of his talent. He's no way near maximising it. It isn't going anywhere. So if he's not asking people for help, why aren't they helping him? And I think that's a sad state of affairs for him, really.
I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? When you're in a club environment or even a county club where youngsters are coming through, you're expecting the coaches in those situations to be talking about technique, to be trying to get these players better so they can actually make a profession of it and go on and be successful. There's a kind of school of thought that when you get to England, the coaches are no longer there to do that. And they're more of a sounding board and more of a guidance and that kind of thing. But Phil, if I was going to an England team, I'd still want to be working on certain things. I guess it's maybe player driven a little bit more than coach driven. It might be the player likes to do a certain thing and he needs a coach there to help him do that. But is it the responsibility of the coach to get in Ollie Pope's ear, or is it the responsibility of Ollie Pope to ask the coaches for guidance? Because there is an element here of player responsibility and being responsible for your own game, isn't there?
Yeah, well, each player should be taking responsibility for their own performance, and that will involve where they need it, making use of the resources that we can offer. We as England can offer them. So, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, players are primarily responsible for their own performances. That said, what's going on around them can make life easier, and we as a cricketing nation can be preparing them properly for their performances. So, yes, if you're presented with what we've got at the moment on any reading of that pitch, the first innings performance of pretty much everybody was unacceptable. So it needed that's a professional responsibility thing. The fact that we haven't had preparation games, that's what's not helping them. I mean, it's the same reason that I think when you look at Leach's figures in the first test, you've got to step back and say, well, you've been handed a really, a rough set of, a rough hand to play. But Ollie Pope should, as far as I'm concerned, if he's not receiving the help that he should be getting, he should be asking for it and making sure that the management know that he wants it and needs it. Because otherwise, I mean, what's his average? I was just looking at his average. I think he's averaging 12 on this tour. That he must understand, and I'm just picking him out. He's not the only one. He must understand that can't carry on. So, what steps is he going to take to remedy it? I think I might have cut out there.
I think, Mark, as well. It's a difficult situation because it's not like they're all drones. They're not all, cricketer is an all-encompassing word. They're all different individuals, aren't they? What might make Ollie Pope tick probably doesn't work for Joe Root. What makes Joe Root tick might not work for Ben Stokes, etc., throughout the squad. And you've got a situation there that, I mean, I'm talking particularly about walking out to the middle when you're going out to bat. What makes somebody be on an even keel and be in the best position they can be to face every ball at the start of their innings? I mean, Viv Richards famously had that swagger, didn't he? Walked out there with his chest out, his medallion kind of rattling against his chest, chewing the gum. That apparently was an act by Viv Richards. He wanted to impose himself on the opposition. He wanted to play that part of somebody that was really in control and was confident. That works for him. Ollie Pope and co. We've got to find a way that works for them, haven't they?
Well, yeah, they've got to find a way that works for them. And I think, when we talk about people like Mark Ramprakash, I mean, Ollie was right. In the 90s, it was a chaotic system. I think if Mark Ramprakash played now, he'd have been a very successful player. Ollie Pope and batters these days, I don't think have a huge amount of excuses because they've got central contracts. They're looked after. There's more coaches for England than there are Yellowways coaches in Yorkshire. They've got more coaches than anything. The support staff out there is monumental. So they can't say they haven't got enough support. They've got psychologists, they've got nutritionists, they've got Graham Thorpe who says, he tries to get them in the zone. He doesn't do too much technical coaching. They've got everything there. It's obviously got too much choice, so they get confused. It's just about someone like Ollie Pope. He has got ability, but he looks frantic at the crease. When you see him, he's got an average of 99 for Surrey at the Oval. I've seen him get 2 centuries for Surrey. He bats completely differently. So what's going on? It's obviously something it's a mindset of his that he needs to, I don't know, he needs to see a psychologist or whatever, but he's got to become mentally far more tougher to be able to, withstand the demands of Test match cricket.
Would you take him out of the firing line at the minute, Mark? Would you move him out of the squad, out of the team for Melbourne, or would you basically say to him, go out there and put it right?
Well, I would if there was somebody to put in, but there's no one there, is there? Because
Dan Lawrence is waiting in the wings after a very good Lions trip to Australia 2 years ago.
Yeah, but there's Dan Lawrence, but it's a bit unfair on that. They've played no cricket. Even Johnny Bairstow played no cricket. You said today in your tweet James Vince could come in, but at least he's been playing some cricket. I know you're a big fan of his, so you'll have him in any side. But I mean,
he's called James.
We're in this situation where, as Phil says, we play no practice games. You got all these players on the sidelines doing nothing, and then you say, well, okay, your reputation's better because you're out the team. You're out the team, your reputation's being enhanced. So actually, I'm going to bring you back in the team because he's not doing well. Because while you've been out of the team, your reputation's been going up. And that's what we do. And then Bairstow comes in last summer, gets a few runs. He's out. Pope's back. Lawrence is in. He's out. I mean, it's just, there's no excuse for England. They've got the best setup in the world in terms of academies, central contracts, all the rest of it. And they just cannot produce consistency in terms of their batters in particular. There's no excuse for him anymore. There's absolutely no excuse. And, Pope needs to get his head sorted out and get out there and find a way. Otherwise, you've got to be dropped, yeah.
The reason I like James Vince is he's still only 30. He should be in the middle of his prime years as a top quality player. He's played 13 Test matches before, I think, in a couple of incarnations as a Test player, but he hasn't played for some time. And it struck me in his second part as a Test player. His final innings was 76, 78 or something like that in New Zealand. And he'd been criticised all the way through for getting 15, 20, 25 and then edging to slip. And it just looked like he was starting to find his feet a little bit. And then they axed him and he was gone. He's obviously far more experienced in the same way that David Milan has come back in and looked a better, more mature individual, I think, this second time around, Ollie. There's potential for James Vince to kind of follow that same path, isn't there? And just because you failed once, you might be in a stronger position to come back in a second time.
Yeah, it's a funny one with James Vince. He's pretty divisive, isn't he? You get a lot of players like that. And he's in that time of his career. I would say absolutely prime time to bring someone back if he's committed to it and feel and they want to back him. It's similar. I'm just watching Mark. He's had a glass of wine and he's just going for a little snoop there.
I'm hoping that robe doesn't open.
Yeah. And yeah, I look back at some other players who've made that change at 30 or a bit older and come in and had a great career. Hussey, I know they're predominantly Australian. Langer and Hayden came in and they started to have their careers then. You know your own game. You're a lot more comfortable with it. And also you're experienced enough to know what to do the next time around. And sometimes when it comes to that point, you're not expecting, like James Vince wouldn't be, you'd have a bit like David Milan. You'd say, I'm just going to enjoy it this time. Yeah. I want to enjoy it as much as I can. Go in and do it, and in that relaxed nature and knowing your own game, you probably do yourself more justice.
I think, Ollie, sometimes, we talk about youngsters having no fear sometimes, but it's also massive for them because they see that. It's like when you sit your exams, isn't it, at school? You see that as being your only chance to ever do anything. You've got to pass those exams or you're going to be cast on a rubbish heap for life. And as you get older, you realise you get second chances if you kind of, And as a player, when you get to 30, you may see it in a totally different way. You might, the world looks different, doesn't it? The fact that you get out for naught in a Test match, it doesn't actually really matter that much, does it? You've going to get another second innings, and ultimately, if you get dropped, it's not the end of the world because you've still got a family and you've got friends, you've got other things to do. You're a bit more of a rounded character, I think. James Vince. And like I say, David Milan, I think England didn't get the best out of James Vince in the first time around because James Vince is a terrific player for me. He's got every single shot in the book. He looks absolutely immaculate at the crease, and then he flashes to gully. I reckon he could take out the flash to gully this time and actually be a really good Test player.
I would think that. I mean, if I was coming into the England squad now, it must be horrific because they don't know if they're coming or going. And you would literally, this is a nicer way, I know no one would admit this, I'd just play for myself. I'd be totally selfish and do what I wanted to do because it's such a mess at the moment. I think players would think that way, not maybe subconsciously, because it's pretty bad in there at the moment. And morale must be awful, must be really low. Every young player they've tried, or even an experienced one like Denley, they've either messed around and changed the person's game and just used them as a stopgap, or they've been criticised them for playing their own game. And if Ollie Pope comes in and he plays Ollie Pope's way, or James Vince comes in and plays what you expect from James Vince and he gets out, people criticise it. You can't win. It's so difficult.
I'll tell you what as well. The amount of people who are suggesting that a Chris Wokes or a Ben Stokes or a Johnny Bairstow or a Joss Buttler should open the innings at Melbourne. This is an opening batsman, Phil, in a test arena. It's a specialist position. You're taking on the best bowlers in the world against the new ball You've got to know where your off stump is. Well, supposedly know where your off stump is. Know what to leave, what to play. It's a totally different role than somebody coming in at 5, 6, 7 in the order, isn't it? You can't just jettison somebody up from number 7 to open and expect them to hit the ground running. They've never done it before.
No, I agree, but the reason people are suggesting these is because it's so desperate up top. It's. I mean, but Burns fought hard in that second innings and is to be commended for it. But it was a horror show to watch, and the idea of making him. I mean, the damage we must be doing to him. The damage we must be doing to him.
Well, did you hear what that 10-year-old kid said to him in the nets?
No, I didn't.
He said, do you like cricket? And he said, sometimes, or something like a really downcast. Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, there is more to life than cricket. And at the minute, we are grinding that poor sod into the ground. You got to commend him for that knock, just for the guts, if not the technique, because that he's obviously committed to that front foot across the line. That looks like a fixture because it's been so widely criticised. He must know it's still there and has decided it's either completely uncontrollable, or he's decided that's what he needs to do to get himself.
Well, he hasn't got long to put it right, Phil, has he? He only had 4 days between Test matches. You try and ingrain that trigger movement so it becomes a natural thing.
That can't be a trigger movement, can it?
But to take that away from your game in 4 days is very difficult.
But it came in quite quickly. I never noticed it before, and the thing is it's catastrophic, that front foot movement. I mean, if he hasn't got rid of it now, he needs to go until he can put it can remedy it, because it's otherwise we just the opening batting is the core to what's happening as far as I'm concerned. If there was some type of basis and the rest were coming in with some type of foundation, I know it's awful to lump this pressure onto someone like Hamid, who's so young and inexperienced, and Burns, who's really going for a rough trot. But if that's not remedied, the ones that are coming in afterwards are starting on the back foot, and they're not good enough at the moment.
David Milan is effectively opening on this tour, isn't he?
So is Root. They're both coming in. We're coming down regularly at 20 for 2. So we're playing with 7 batsmen. So the idea, coming back to your starting point, I mean, if we are just going to throw those 2 wickets away, which is what we are doing at the moment, why not gamble? Today, I mean, if Buttler stays in the team, and last week I said I'd have folks, I got a bit of a pantomime gasp from my colleagues on the screen before me. But if Butler's going to stay in there, there doesn't really seem to be much point to him batting at 6, because he's a walking wicket as well. So you might as well send him up front as a pinch hitter and
let's come
just have a go.
Let's come to Josh Buttler, because and we'll caveat this, because regardless of what we say, and regardless of what social media says, regardless of what anybody in the newspapers say, Josh Buttler will play at Melbourne, because Josh Buttler is basically undroppable in this side at the moment. So he will turn up. And the fact that he gritted it out for 28 or something over about 10 hours on the final day and got himself out and trod on his wicket and got himself out will be seen as him showing his character and his fortitude and what have you. But to me, I mean, we've talked about this till the cows come home. 55 Test matches, 2 centuries. He does not know his game. He does not know his Test match game. It's no coincidence that today he batted a long time, because he knew that when he went to the crease, it was defend, defend, defend. He knew exactly what he was going to be asked to do. He went out. It's the same as if you told him to go out and attack, he'd go out and probably play quite a good innings. When he's actually asked to play a normal Test match innings, he doesn't know what to attack. He doesn't know what to defend. He doesn't know when to stick and when to twist. And that's why he's got a very inconsistent and mixed record in the Test arena.
Is it? I'm looking at his averages now. Against the Aussies, he's averaging 21.
Yeah.
And against everybody, all of the major nations, he is averaging not very much.
Apart from Pakistan.
And Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Sri Lanka is averaging nearly 50, which is distorting his general average as far as I'm concerned. So
he averages well against Pakistan. He averages well against Sri Lanka. They're where he got his centuries. And
I think the issue is
he's a very ordinary player.
But he's so destructive. You look at him and you think, God, there's a player in there.
Yeah, but there really never is, Phil. 55
but I mean,
We've been talking about this.
Look,
55 test matches. We've been saying there is the potential for him to be the new Gilchrist. There is a potential for him to go out there and command the stage at number 7 and take England from 200 for 5 to 700 for 5 in the space of 2 minutes. He never, ever does it.
But if it's a case of not knowing his mind, and I think there might be something in that, well, that's a management issue. Just tell him what to do. Just say, just go out there and...
If it's not a management issue, Phil, he's 55 test matches old now.
Yeah,
he's a very seasoned campaigner. If he doesn't know and he's not completely convinced what his role in that side is, he's big enough and ugly enough to walk up to Chris Silverwood and say, "What do you actually want me to do, mate?" Isn't he?
Yeah, no. He, like I said earlier, in relation to another question, personal responsibility. Players need to, sort their own games out primarily. It's complicated by the wicket keeping issue. He's keeping for long periods of time because the bowling is reasonably ineffective. He's having to come in much earlier than he should, and then he's having to perform often in a crisis situation. So all the pressure is being heaped on him. He's clearly struggling with the basics of his game in the red ball game. Everything is working against him. He's in there as a wicket keeper. That's what he's meant to be there first and foremost. I don't think he should be in there keeping wicket because he's there's no way of dressing it up. I don't think he's a good enough keeper to be keeping internationally. So then if that adds pressure again onto his game because he's underperforming, often in the light of something not going well with the gloves, and then it's added pressure into his batting game. You either manage him and you tell him, look, I don't care about your average anymore. Just go out there and smash it. Your job is pinch hitter. Just go and do it. Because we've got no one else left. There's no one going to come in and average more than you anyway. Go in there and have a go. But I mean, for me, as I've said before, I would have Folkes in that team. Folkes would be in there. He'd be in there ahead of Buttler on his batting. He's certainly in there ahead of his in terms of his keeping. And it gives. Last week I was talking about giving the bowlers something to work with. You've got a keeper that is going to take 90% of the catches, who you can trust standing up. It's certainly going to add more for Leach. I mean, Leach. How much more effective would Leach be knowing he's got folks behind the stumps rather than Joss? So
I'm with you, Phil. I'd have Ben Folkes in because the other thing is that you drop Marnus Labuschagne on 21. He goes on to score 103. You're already in deficit by 82 runs to your team. And I think as well, we'll come on to Mark. We'll bring Mark in on this now. I think the keeper, Mark, sets the tone in the field. England have been a shambles in the field. They've dropped catches left, right and centre. I think the keeper, he sets the benchmark for the rest of that team. If he's looking tidy, if he's taking his chances, and if that oozes around the slip cordon and around the infield and back out to the boundary, and everybody thinks, all right, we're on message now, we're going well. You would have caught that catch off Labuschagne on 95, Mark.
Especially with the training I've been doing, you're absolutely right. The keeper does set the tone. But let's not forget, I do think Folkes is obviously a better keeper. Folkes made a couple of howlers when he kept in the winter against India. So they all dropped them. To allow,
I'll tell you what though, Mark. If we'd seen Jos Buttler keeping on pitches 3 and 4 in India, it would have been a mess.
Yeah, I'm not saying it might not have been a mess, but we know that Jos Buttler's going to stay in the side because it's Joe Root's mates, and it comes back to what I said before about Joe Root's mental kind of toughness. Josh is his big mate. Long as Joe's there as captain, Josh, to all intents and purposes, unless he really bombs out, will always be picked as the vice captain, and that's it. I think we've been talking here, all four of us, and I've just been listening to it, and it just seems to me that we're all getting confused because of the up to shambles that England are in. This is a country and a side that has more resources pumped into it than any country who plays world cricket. Even India don't get as many resources pumped into the international side as England does, despite the riches of India. And we're a total shambles. We're talking about putting Jos Buttler as a pinch hitter. What's it come to? Putting him as a pinch hitter, opening the batting, and We're talking about, after 55 tests that he needs to go and ask Chris Silverwood about how to bat in a test match. You're right, after 55 test matches, you shouldn't be doing that. You should know how to bloody bat in a test match. You should know how to do that. He's not a novice. And we've got all these coaches. We've got Graham Thorpe talking about I'm in the nets and, I'm not there for technical coaching. I'm there for the mental stuff. And, we've got physios. It's almost, it's like we've got too many of those people. Actually, we need to strip it back. And, we're overplaying the importance of coaches and psychologists and this, that, and the other. We just need a few of them because at the moment, we've got all these people working with them, and none of them seems to be making any difference to them. And these are the best cricketers we've got because you look outside of them, there ain't anybody banging on the door to come in, is there really? So we're in a complete state.
I said earlier that if you just because we're cricket fans and lovers, we and obviously playing international cricket is the pinnacle. Playing Test cricket is the pinnacle. You automatically have this thing at the back of your head that if you get dropped from playing in the Test team, that must be the end of your world. That must be you condemned to the scrap heap for life.
Central contracts, they come back. They're on a central.
But even if it's his last Test match, that isn't the end of Jos Buttler, is it? I mean, let's think about this. He plays in the IPL, he plays in the Big Bash League, he plays in the Caribbean Premier League, he probably gets asked to play in the Pakistan Super League.
The only reason Jos Buttler is playing
he plays white ball cricket for England in both formats. Yeah. He's probably going to be captain of England.
He's playing it for his professional pride. He's got enough money. He doesn't need to play Test cricket for the money.
I mean, he's been talking about how he needs to spend time with his family. This is a great opportunity for him to spend a bit more time with his family and his young family. So it's not the end of Jos Buttler. The consolation prize is a very nice life, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lovely life for him. But obviously, as a 31-year-old professional cricketer, he still has ambitions to play red ball cricket. And from a professional point of view, he feels as though he can prove himself in that. And fair play to him to want to do that. It'd be easy for him to throw in the towel, as some of them have, and said, well, okay, I'm just going to be a 2020 mercenary all around the world and earn X amount.
I think he was going to do that, Mark, and he got persuaded by Ed Smith to play Test cricket, didn't he?
Well, he did. Yeah, he may well have done, but he wants to. He could have he could have thrown the towel in regardless of Ed Smith, but he kept at it. He's kept at it regardless of a young family. So you've got to give him credit for that. He's had a good go at it, and he wants to prove himself. But I don't think. I mean, look, if you look at his statistics, even if you look at his overall record in first-class cricket, I think he's got 7 first-class tons over his career. 7 first-class tons. He averages the same in first-class cricket, a bit like Zach Crawley, as what he was in Test match cricket. He averages no different. He's never been a red ball player. Ever been a red ball player.
He's potentially the best white ball batsman in the world, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think going forward, we have to recognise that, in 5-10 years' time, the idea we're going to have loads of multifunctional players, they're already declining. You're not going to have it. You're already moving towards specialist red, specialist white ball players. And it's going to become more pronounced as players play more franchises because they're not going to practice those red ball skills as tours get shorter, as we don't have as many practice games, etc., etc., etc. We're not going to have that multifaceted player anymore. They're declining. That's it.
I mean, Ollie, if I was to offer you Jos Buttler's life and said to you, I'm going to scrap you from the Test arena, but you're going to spend more time with your lovely young family. You're going to play franchise cricket around the world in the sunshine, and then England will come calling for you in the white ball arena as and when is required. That's not bad, is it?
No. I mean, I'd take that, to be honest. It's a nice 9 to 5, better than what I've got going at the moment. But for him, like Mark touched on, it's the pride, because all the professional players know that the pinnacle of the sport is to do it at Test level. He really seems very keen to do that at Test level. I just think he's been really fortunate to get this many opportunities. If you compare him to maybe Australia's version of him, Glenn Maxwell played 4 Tests and he's got 1 ton, and that was in India. And then he never picked again, not even considered. Jos Buttler wouldn't get anywhere near the Test team in Australia, and that's not saying that they're not super strong. It's just that they have a better system for doing it, and it's not a clique that it's difficult to get into. I think he's a really fortunate person. That the fact is that he's still in a team, won because he's potentially friends with Joe Root, according to sources on here, and also the fact is we've got literally no other talent that's coming through to push any pressure on.
I mean, devil's advocate question this, because I don't totally believe it, but the kind of clique, the leadership group for England is Joe Root, Joss Buttler, Ben Stokes. That's the kind of little trio that tend to rule the roost. And then you've got Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad probably dipping in and dipping out of that. There's been often said Joss Butler's kind of gets to be undroppable because he's so important in the dressing room and he keeps England on the right path. Well, England is so far off the path at the minute. Surely that excuse is gone, isn't it?
Possibly, but I mean, the difficulty is that it might be that he is doing a good job behind the scenes, and it could be a hell of a lot worse. I mean, if Broad and Anderson are that difficult to manage, and if the world is screaming, pitch it up. Even the Australian commentators who are doing my head in at the moment, but nevertheless, they're screaming, pitch it up, pitch it up. And the only people that seem not to think that's the answer are Broad and Anderson. So if that's demonstrative of the dysfunction in the team, then Root does need someone. Otherwise, he's completely outnumbered, because then you're asking some of the youngsters to step up. There are a lot of youngsters in that team, or inexperienced players. I suppose Milan is the next one that needs to sort of evolve into that leadership team and be a part of it. But remember that Stokes has been out for a long time, so it's just been Buttler and Root trying to sort of steer the team through this particular period. And so if it needs that voice to try and control Anderson and Broad, Alistair Cook was talking about managing Anderson and trying to persuade him. It's almost like you can't tell him directly. You almost have to corral him into doing what you need him to do. And it's been successful for Anderson. You can't. That's been his game. It's generally worked for us, but at the moment we're seeing perhaps the other side of it, the rough end of it. Perhaps we need someone like Buttler in there to stem that tide. And in terms of batting, there appear to be the worst performers in that team at the moment. I mean, he's certainly not batting that far below. He's not batting below Pope in terms of performance, and probably Burns and Hamid. He's still ahead of them in terms of what he's offering to the team at the moment, in terms of productiveness. So, is he the person in terms of batting that needs to be removed from this team? Batting wise, probably not. And if he is offering something that's helping Joe Root mitigate the difficulties, then that's another argument for keeping him in there. I think again he benefits from the fact that who else do you bring in? I mean, for him it's Folkes, but I think I could see a team where Folkes and Buttler are playing in them with Folkes keeping, because we are struggling.
No.
But we're I mean, if you in theory take Pope out and you take Burns out and you take Hamid out, you've got to find three more to come in.
Did you say you could see a team with Folkes and Butler with Butler keeping?
No,
with Folkes keeping.
Oh, okay, that's why I went no.
Sorry, with Folkes keeping, because there really does seem to be a dearth. I mean, unless you are just going to chuck a youngster in as a bit of a Hail Mary and say, "Go on then," which in many respects I would.
They've got to start looking at succession planning for Rooty. I mean, if I was Rooty, I'd be thinking of, after this Australian trip, I'd be thinking, do I actually need this in my life? Because it's being captain of your country is one hell of an honour, but it's also one hell of a pressure and a time-consuming role, isn't it? You're never off duty as England captain.
We're banging trouble. We're banging trouble if that happens.
Yeah. And after 5 test matches in Australia, if they carry on in this same vein, I might be getting back on the plane if I'm Joe Root and thinking somebody else can do this. I was on a podcast earlier, Ollie, and they said ECB can't afford him to go. They'll have to make him stay and be captain. I said, well, you can't put him in a cupboard at Lord's. You can't just keep him prisoner and just bring him out as captain. But, where do they look for the next captain? Has there got to be some kind of succession planning? I mean, Tom Abel at Somerset, he looks like a good, young, intelligent player, but you can't just throw him in as captain. Can you get him in the side and maybe get him 10 test matches before he takes on the job? Or how do you do this?
Do you know, it's been done before. So they've done it with Graham Smith. South Africa took it on very young. and very early into his career, not on from a debut. And Mike Atherton had only played about 10, 15 tests when he became captain for the longest period. But they're rarities, aren't they? It's so difficult. I don't know where you go, because I look around the counties and predominantly Lancs, who are who captained by Dane Villas. I wouldn't see any other people there in the team really who are knocking down the door at Lancs. I don't know who are around the other leading counties, who are the English players who are really looking that they could lead it. Possibly Abel. James Vince is captain, but he'd have to get in the side first. He's captain of Hampshire. That's an option. But you'd have to have someone with a long-term plan, almost like they did with the white ball, to say this is going to...
Sorry, Ollie. Somebody said to me the other day, we should bring Ben Folkes back in as keeper. He's captain Surrey. He can captain England as well. Can you imagine the pressure on him if you bring him back in as captain too? Blimey.
Do you see how absurd the whole situation has got? That, I just keep going back before. We've got all this infrastructure, and we've got absolutely no one. I mean, Root will go if we lose this series 5-0. He will go. There's no doubt about it, because his cycle will be up. But there's no succession plan. There's no one to replace him. It's just like going back. It reminds me when Ollie was saying that, like going back to, remember that, was it 1988 when we had 4 captains in one seat? We plucked Chris Cowdery out from nowhere to captain a test match. We're going back to that scenario.
Was Gatting was Gooch Gatting? There was
Gower had one, didn't he?
Emery took a test, didn't he?
Then he broke his finger, Cowdery, and that was the only test match he played. We're going back to that order in England. That's the only test match he played. Yeah. Even though we've got central contracts and all this infrastructure, we're actually reverting back to those old days of the late 80s in the terms of,
what scares me, Mark? What scares me, Mark, is that we'll get to a stage where Root will resign or get sacked at the end of this Ashes. They'll look around the dressing room and think, well, Stokes has got too bad a disciplinary record, and we don't want to saddle the kind of prize all-rounder with that job. Anderson and Broad are getting too long in the tooth and might not play every game. The only person that's actually settled is Joss. Joss is going to be captain of the Test team.
That would not surprise me.
It'd be crazy.
It'd be crazy, but the alternatives, we've got no alternatives because no one's scoring runs. Stokes, as you say, is the all-round. He's also had quite a lot of personal issues to start out in the last 12 months. Giving him the captaincy at this stage is really not on in my view. There's nobody there. Rory Burns is talking about. He's not going to stay in this. It's a complete shambles, and it's a shambles of our own making in the sense that we've run down first-class cricket. We've got basically white, middle-class public school boys playing the game. It's not as inclusive as it should be. We've got less participation, and you reap what you sow, really. And this is what we've got. We reap what we sow, and we've got the accumulation of years and years of neglect of the first-class game and declining participation in state schools, club cricket, etc.
I'll come back with just a slight argument against you. Guarantee that when Australia come to England next time, England will probably win that series. Australia are having exactly the same debate in Australia. Australia are talking about the Big Bash using the biggest chunk of their summer, and the Sheffield Shield's getting sidelined.
They may well. I mean, I think the ECB's model is, as long as England win at home and we can fill out test grounds and make money, then it doesn't matter if we lose away from home. But unfortunately, they've started losing at home as well as away from home. And that's what's exacerbated the situation. It's always difficult to win away from home, but as long as they've got full stadiums at home and England are winning, then the ECB are generally happy because most people go and watch test matches, go once or twice to a cricket ground every year or whatever, and the grounds are full and this and the other. So they're happy, they're making money, England are winning. Go away from home, occasional away win, great. But actually what matters is we've got the money in the bank, we've got the white ball game going, we're making all the cash and all the revenue. But actually, while they're doing that, they're just not looking at the infrastructure of the game and how it's declining substantially. And now you
do not need to convince me of this argument, Mark. Yeah, Indian B team was more competitive against Aussies than the current English team says SS98. Was definitely got a point there. Let's finish a couple of points. Ollie Robinson's spin bowling. It was mentioned earlier. Ollie Robinson was a spinner in his youth. It wasn't kind of like they just chucked him a ball and said, "See if you can spin this." He can bowl spin. He bowled spin at Yorkshire and he bowled spin in his early days at Kent. But he wasn't picked by England to bowl spin, was he? He wasn't picked by England to tour Australia to bowl spin. It seemed to me on that morning, England had taken some wickets. They'd got actually for one session. They'd actually started well, and they'd got a little bit of a foothold in that session. And then Ollie Robinson came on. They started just milking him around for singles. Suddenly, everything relaxed a little bit, and Australia were off the hook. It seemed Ben Stokes was captain at that stage. Ollie, it was ridiculous.
There was a rumour going around that it was to do with overrates to try and push that in to make sure they could keep a bit of cash. That's what one of the rumours was. Yeah, but also, what does it come to? I mean, absolutely hats off to him. Bowling in shades and bowling offies like that. That's a low point for English cricket. But I think what it shows more about is again what we talked about earlier. No leadership, and there's no momentum. There's none of, and you expect it. Even if Stokes was captain, you'd expect someone to grasp the game by the throat, and he would look to someone like that. It looks again as if Anderson or Broad didn't fancy it, even though Anderson averaged 22 with the ball in the Test match. It's a very strange situation. My friend Brooko would ask me, and he doesn't often follow cricket, but he'll follow the Ashes, and say, "Oh, how are we doing? We've got a chance in this." And if he saw that, he'd be laughing. He's like, "What's going? This is ridiculous." And
it was embarrassing, wasn't it?
You've got to be careful with the averages, though, haven't you? Because that's the problem. That's why they're bowling short.
Yeah.
Is to preserve their averages. So their averages are completely meaningless.
Well, I often think I was Stuart Broad, in England as well, where Stuart Broad often bowls a 6-over spell or something to open with a new ball. And he'll come off and you look at his stats. If you've missed the morning session, you look at his stats at lunchtime. He's bowled 6 overs, 4 maidens, none for 3 or something like that. And you think, oh, blimey, he must have bowled well. You actually watch it and everything was 2 foot outside the off stump on a length. And he's just basically trying to tempt that cover drive to maybe get an edge to slip. But generally, they're leaving it alone and they're seeing him off.
Yeah,
his stats look great.
Yeah. But I think in England that happens because the new ball doesn't swing immediately. It has to wait. They say it has to be about 10 overs for it to start to go. There's almost too much lacquer on it. That's what they have been saying recently. And it goes after.
Apparently, Broad's bowling leg spin in the third Test. Broad's bowling leg spin, and Ollie Robinson's playing as a designated spinner. Ollie Robinson's opening the innings. Ollie's going to open the innings with Chris Woakes.
You've all forgotten the plan. I'm going out there. You've forgotten the plan. I'm lying. When
we said that Mark's in Egypt, listeners and watchers, basically he's in a very intense training camp, as you can tell from the red wine he's necking. He's basically
all the time. I'm out in the hills, jogging, and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
getting myself tuned up.
So when you see that face that's in the top right-hand corner on a press conference ahead of the MCG test, being unveiled as the new hope for English cricket, then that is the time. That is the time to end your BT subscriptions and basically stop everything. Let's have a very, very one-liner look ahead to the MCG. England 2-0 down. Ollie, is there any hope? Is there any hope? Any hope at all?
Rain and an absolute shirt front of a pitch, but even then, I don't think we'll be able to bat out more than 2.5 days, which they're bound to set us to do. Hope, yeah, it's what gets you, isn't it? I'm a little bit hopeful, but I'm expecting quite a heavy defeat there, unless they do some changes. There's talk of Saqib Mahmood possibly coming in. I mean, but again, the bowling's not going to get us 400 runs, is it? So it'll get them, plenty, but not for us. So no, I think it's going to be another defeat. Unfortunately, it's looking possibly one of the most depressing tours.
The Saqib Mahmood news of him being maybe drafted in from the Big Bash. If you're Overton or somebody else, it doesn't send you a great message, does it? That you've been waiting there for your turn and they're going to ship somebody in. In my view, though, Saqib Mahmood should have been in that squad at the start. So I totally agree with his inclusion if that is the way they go with it. Phil, give me some hope, please.
Do you know, I think that one of the two test matches might be a draw. And that's because I'm not sure the Aussies are the brightest bunch. And I say that because I was a bit surprised by the fact that they didn't make us follow on in the series. And it was the only opportunity that was left for us in that game, bearing in mind the distances between us, was for us to, bearing in mind we'd put all our eggs in the pink ball under lights basket, was to then have a little bat, starting off with a new ball under the lights. And if we'd skittled them, which, Broad and Anderson, for all their bit of non-performance in this test, are still top quality bowlers, it was conceivable that the Aussies could have been skittled. That was the only opportunity for us to get back in.
I genuinely think they just wanted day 4 gate receipts.
Yeah, I mean, but if that's their attitude, then that type of stupidity could have let us back in. And we ended up 2.5 hours short. It just needs 2 of them to have got in and hunkered down properly. Someone to have got in with Buttler, and had a really.
It's like somebody said at the end, Phil. I think each of the 10 partnerships needed to be another 2 overs longer, or something like that, and it would have nearly taken them to the end. That would have been. So you've given me the hope for maybe a draw. Ollie's given me no hope whatsoever.
Are that stupid again to not go for the jugular? Then they deserve what they get, and Phil, hopefully a draw comes.
I've got no hope from Ollie. Got no hope from Phil, and then I look up to my last guest and think, well, he's going to give me nothing, is he? Mark, any hope?
Yeah, I mean, the pitches at Melbourne recently have been flat, haven't they? They've been quite flat, some quite dull cricket there. So even England, I think, if Root could get a big score there, they could score runs there because it's flat. And I don't think this Australian side is the best side in the world. It's not their best side. We're not talking, vintage Australia here. We're not. So I still think that Root can get runs at some point in a big 100. So Melbourne, if it's flat, might be the best opportunity they have to get a draw at least. But I think they're going to have to play Jack Leach at Melbourne. They're going to have to play a spinner, a proper spinner at Melbourne. They've got to, given the nature of what's gone on there.
I'll tell you, you said everything's topsy-turvy, it's a shambles. Comes to something when you're the only person that gives me any kind of positivity whatsoever.
Well, for Melbourne's flat, so if we can't score runs at Melbourne, we're not going to score runs in the other 2 test matches coming up, are we? Melbourne is the only place. I mean, where's the last 2? Hobart and where's
Sydney and Hobart.
Well, Sydney and Hobart. They ain't going to score runs there if they can't score runs at Melbourne. Melbourne's going to be flat, and it might rain at Melbourne as well. So that's another reason they might get a draw. Because it's more like kind of.
So it's come to that. It's come to that. We've got Josh Buttler and Chris Wokes opening, and we're doing a rain dance.
Yeah, we've got central contracts. We've got all this administration, but it's back to the 90s. We might win the odd test match. That's what it's got. What it got back to, essentially.
Well, I'd love to say the last hour has been a joy, but it's been basically we've just been dissecting England's disasters, haven't we? It's not been the best, but hopefully, listeners, when we come back to you in between the 3rd and 4th test matches, we'll have something a little bit more positive to talk about, even if it's just everybody's Christmases. Mark in Egypt, Ollie and Phil in the UK, have wonderful Christmases. Enjoy yourselves, all 3 of you, as everybody out there as well. Thanks for listening and watching as we've gone through the 2021 year. We'll come back, as I say, between Christmas and New Year with one final podcast of the year to finish off the Ashes tests of 2021. But enjoy yourselves over Christmas, everybody. Have a very good time, and we'll see you again very soon indeed. Cheers, everybody.